What goes through a woman's mind when she chooses another man over you? Does she regret it? Does she feel guilty? Or does she simply move on without looking back? The truth is hard to hear, but understanding it can completely change the way you see relationships forever. Today, we're going to break down the real emotions a woman experiences when she walks away and gives her attention, heart, and energy to another man. And by the end of this video, you'll understand one powerful truth. Her choice says more about her emotional state than your value as a man. Comment, I choose clarity. Number 1. She doesn't value you anymore. The hardest thing for a man to accept is that a woman can slowly stop valuing him while still keeping him around, because many men believe loyalty, effort, patience, and consistency automatically make a woman appreciate them more. But that is not how attraction works in real life, because when she stops valuing you emotionally, she starts treating your presence like something ordinary instead of something meaningful. Your attention becomes expected, your kindness becomes ignored, your sacrifices become invisible. And the painful part is that you keep trying harder, thinking more effort will bring back the connection, when in reality, your desperation quietly pushes her even further away, because people rarely value what they believe they can never lose. And this is why you start noticing small changes in her behavior long before the relationship completely falls apart. She takes longer to reply, her energy becomes colder, she stops asking about your day, she no longer sounds excited to see you, and conversations begin feeling one-sided, like you are carrying the emotional weight of the entire connection by yourself, while she simply exists inside it without effort. And deep down, this destroys something inside a man, because he remembers how things used to be in the beginning, when she could not stop talking to him, when she wanted his attention constantly, when she valued every second he gave her. But now it feels like he is slowly disappearing in her eyes, and this creates confusion, because most men think love should grow stronger the more they give. But many times women begin losing attraction when they sense that a man's entire emotional state depends on them, because emotional dependence kills mystery, it kills tension, and it removes the challenge she once felt emotionally. And this is where many men lose themselves completely, because instead of pulling back and rebuilding their own life, they start abandoning themselves, trying to save the relationship. They over-explain, they over-text, they constantly seek reassurance, they watch her behavior obsessively, hoping for signs that she still cares, and without realizing it, they slowly place her at the center of their entire existence, while neglecting their own purpose, discipline, goals, health, and self-respect. And this creates a dangerous cycle, because the less he values himself, the less she values him too. Not because she is evil, but because human nature responds to strength, emotional stability, self-control, and confidence, while weakness, fear, and neediness slowly destroy attraction over time, no matter how good a man's heart is. And this truth hurts, because many men grow up believing love is about giving endlessly without limits. But Stoic thinking teaches something completely different. It teaches that your peace, your identity, and your emotional balance must never be placed into another person's hands. Because the second your happiness depends entirely on her attention, you become emotionally controlled by every message, every delay, every cold response, every change in her tone. And this is exactly why so many men live in constant anxiety inside relationships, because they stop leading themselves and start emotionally chasing validation from women instead. And the painful reality is that she notices this shift immediately, because women are extremely aware of emotional energy, even when they never say it directly. She notices when you become too available, when your world revolves around her, when you stop standing firm in your own direction. And once she senses that she no longer has to earn your attention, she unconsciously stops respecting its value, because scarcity creates importance, while endless availability creates emotional boredom. And this is why some men get completely destroyed emotionally after giving everything to a woman who slowly stops appreciating them, because they cannot understand how someone they treated so well can become so emotionally distant. But the answer is simple. Attraction without respect cannot survive, and respect disappears when a man abandons himself trying to hold on to someone else. And this is where your transformation begins, because the situation that hurts you the most can also become the reason you rebuild yourself completely if you choose discipline over emotional chaos. If you stop chasing her approval and start rebuilding your body, your mind, your confidence, your routines, your standards, and your purpose. Because the truth is, a woman losing interest should never destroy your life. It should expose the areas where you forgot yourself, where you became emotionally dependent, where you tolerated behavior that slowly broke your confidence, and where you placed too much value on someone else instead of building value within yourself. And once you understand this, everything changes, because now her behavior no longer controls your emotions. Now her silence no longer destroys your peace. Now her attention no longer defines your worth, because you finally realize something powerful. The strongest position a man can ever be in is not desperately trying to keep someone who stopped valuing him. It is becoming so emotionally grounded, disciplined, calm, and focused on his own path that he never needs to beg for appreciation from anyone ever again. And ironically, this is when people begin respecting him more, because he no longer radiates fear of losing others. He radiates self-respect, emotional control, and inner stability. And those qualities change every area of a man's life far beyond dating. Because once a man stops chasing validation from women, he begins becoming dangerous in the best possible way. He thinks clearly, he moves differently, he focuses deeper, he carries himself with quiet confidence, and he finally understands that his value does not rise or fall based on who chooses him, because real strength begins when a man chooses himself first. Number 2. She's emotionally detached. Before a woman completely leaves a relationship, her emotions usually leave long before her body does, and this is the stage that silently destroys many men, because they sense something is wrong, but keep lying to themselves, hoping things will somehow return to how they used to be, even while her behavior becomes colder, more distant, more disconnected, and emotionally unavailable. Because emotional detachment rarely happens overnight. It happens slowly through small, repeated moments where she stops investing emotionally, while the man keeps investing more and more, trying to save the connection. And this creates one of the most painful situations a man can experience, because he starts living in emotional confusion every single day. One moment she gives him attention, the next moment she becomes cold again. One day she sounds interested, the next day she acts emotionally unavailable, and this inconsistency slowly drains his confidence, because he keeps searching for emotional certainty from someone who no longer gives it naturally. And many men torture themselves in silence during this stage, because they overthink everything. They analyze her messages, her tone, her energy, her social media activity, her excuses, and her emotional distance, while pretending externally that everything is fine, even though internally they are mentally exhausted from carrying a relationship that no longer feels emotionally secure. And the painful truth is that when a woman becomes emotionally detached, she often starts viewing the relationship as an obligation instead of a desire. Your presence no longer excites her emotionally. Conversations become dry, affection becomes forced, intimacy changes, and you begin feeling like you are emotionally chasing someone who keeps slowly slipping further away, no matter how much effort you give. And this breaks many men, because they genuinely love deeply and believe consistency should be enough to maintain connection. But attraction does not survive only on loyalty and comfort, because emotional connection requires mutual investment. And once one person emotionally checks out, the entire relationship slowly becomes emotionally lifeless, and many men ignore this reality because they fear losing her more than they value facing the truth, so they stay longer than they should. They tolerate emotional neglect. They accept disrespect. They become anxious, trying to regain the version of her that existed in the beginning, while sacrificing their own emotional stability in the process. And this is exactly why Stoic principles matter so much, because emotional control becomes your greatest protection during situations like this. Instead of collapsing emotionally every time her behavior changes, you begin observing reality calmly, without allowing emotions to completely dominate your decisions. Because many men destroy themselves trying to force connection where connection no longer exists naturally. And the more they force it, the weaker they become emotionally. Because desperation creates emotional blindness. It keeps a man attached to potential instead of reality. And this is why emotional discipline changes everything. Because once you stop reacting impulsively, you begin seeing the relationship clearly for what it truly is, instead of what you desperately want it to become. And clarity is powerful because it allows a man to regain control over his mind, his emotions, and his direction, instead of living trapped inside constant emotional uncertainty caused by another person's behavior. And this is where many men begin transforming their lives, because pain forces reflection in a way comfort never does. Suddenly you begin questioning why your happiness became so dependent on one woman's attention, why her emotional distance affects your peace so deeply, why you abandoned your own goals while trying to hold on to someone emotionally detached from you. And these questions become the beginning of real growth, because instead of chasing emotional reassurance, you start rebuilding your inner foundation. You focus on discipline, fitness, routines, purpose, financial growth, emotional control, and self-respect, because you finally realize that no relationship can save a man who has abandoned himself internally. And this understanding changes the way you move through life, because now you stop seeking emotional security from women and begin creating it within yourself first. You stop panicking over delayed replies, emotional distance, or changing behavior, because your entire identity no longer depends on someone choosing you consistently. And ironically, this emotional independence is exactly what many women respect deeply, because calmness, restraint, and self-control create emotional strength, while emotional instability destroys attraction over time. And this is why emotionally detached women often become confused when a man suddenly stops chasing, stops begging, stops reacting emotionally, and starts focusing entirely on himself, because they expect emotional weakness, they expect emotional dependence, they expect panic. But when a man becomes emotionally grounded and refuses to lose himself over another person's behavior, the entire dynamic changes, because now he is operating from self-respect instead of fear. And fear is what destroys so many men emotionally in relationships. Fear of losing her, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of starting over. And those fears keep men trapped in situations that slowly destroy their confidence piece by piece, until they barely recognize themselves anymore. But the truth is, a man who learns emotional discipline becomes free, because he no longer allows another person's emotional inconsistency to control his inner state. And that freedom changes everything, because now he can love without becoming emotionally enslaved. He can care without abandoning himself, and he can walk away from emotionally draining situations with dignity instead of desperation. And once a man reaches that level of self-control, his entire life transforms, because he no longer moves through the world emotionally starving for validation. He moves with calm confidence, clarity, purpose, and quiet strength. And those qualities impact every relationship, every goal, every decision, and every area of his life, far beyond women. because true masculine power begins the moment a man masters himself instead of constantly trying to control how others feel about him. That is exactly why so many men are transforming their lives through the Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men, a powerful guide filled with timeless Stoic principles that teach you how to regain emotional control, rebuild your confidence, stop chasing validation, and finally become emotionally grounded in relationships and life. And the best part is that this knowledge is yours forever, so you can return to it anytime you need strength, clarity, or direction during difficult moments in your life. The audiobook version is now officially available in the comments as well, allowing you to absorb this life-changing wisdom while walking, training, driving, jogging, or sitting alone with your thoughts, rebuilding yourself piece by piece every single day until emotional weakness no longer controls your life. The Stoic Relationship Blueprint course for men is also launching in the coming weeks for those ready to completely transform the way they think, move, and operate as a man. So comment Blueprint right now to get early access before everyone else. Number 3. She stops respecting your boundaries. Respect disappears quietly before a relationship completely falls apart, and many men ignore the signs because they are too emotionally attached to accept what is happening right in front of them. At first, it starts with small things. She dismisses your opinions. She ignores the things that matter to you. She becomes careless with your emotions, and slowly she starts acting as if your standards no longer carry any weight in the relationship. Because once a woman stops respecting your boundaries, she begins testing how much weakness, tolerance, and emotional pain you are willing to accept just to keep her in your life. And this is where many men unknowingly destroy their own confidence, because instead of standing firm, they begin negotiating their self-respect away piece by piece, hoping she will eventually appreciate their patience and loyalty. But the painful truth is that people rarely respect someone who refuses to respect himself, because every time you tolerate behavior that deeply bothers you while pretending it does not affect you, you silently teach her that your standards are flexible and that your fear of losing her is stronger than your ability to walk away. And women notice this immediately because emotional weakness changes the entire energy of a relationship. She starts speaking to you differently, treating you differently, prioritizing you less, and acting more carelessly because deep down she senses you are afraid to enforce consequences. And this is exactly why so many men slowly become emotionally trapped inside unhealthy relationships, because they confuse endurance with strength while abandoning the one thing that keeps attraction alive, which is self-respect. And this creates emotional resentment inside a man because he starts sacrificing his peace, trying to avoid conflict. He stays silent about behavior that bothers him. He suppresses his emotions to keep her happy. He accepts disrespect, hoping things improve. And over time, he becomes emotionally exhausted because living without boundaries slowly destroys a man from the inside, since he is constantly betraying himself to maintain temporary connection. And the dangerous part is that many women lose attraction when they realize a man will tolerate almost anything just to avoid losing them. Because a man without standards becomes emotionally predictable, and predictable behavior removes emotional tension, mystery, and respect from the relationship completely. And this is why Stoic thinking becomes powerful during situations like this. Because instead of reacting emotionally or arguing endlessly, you begin understanding a deeper truth, which is that you cannot control another person's behavior, but you can absolutely control what behavior you allow into your life, because emotional discipline means staying calm while remaining firm. It means refusing to beg for basic respect, refusing to explain your worth endlessly, and refusing to remain inside situations that destroy your peace. Because many men think strength means holding on to relationships no matter what. But true strength often means having the emotional control to leave situations that no longer align with your values, even when it hurts deeply, And this changes everything, because once a man stops operating from fear, he begins seeing reality clearly. He stops making excuses for toxic behavior. He stops chasing emotional breadcrumbs, and he starts protecting his energy with discipline and purpose. And ironically, this is when people begin respecting him more, because boundaries create consequences, and consequences create respect, while endless tolerance creates emotional weakness. And this lesson extends far beyond relationships, because the way you allow women to treat you often reflects the way you view yourself internally. If you constantly accept disrespect, emotional manipulation, dishonesty, and inconsistency just to avoid being alone, then deep down you are communicating to yourself that your standards do not matter, and this destroys confidence over time, because self-respect cannot grow inside a life built on emotional compromise. And this is why many men reach a breaking point emotionally, where they suddenly realize they have spent months or years abandoning themselves, trying to maintain connection with someone who never truly valued their peace to begin with. And that realization hurts deeply, because they understand they were not fighting for love anymore. They were fighting against loneliness, fear, and emotional dependence disguised as love. And this is where transformation begins, because pain forces a man to rebuild himself completely if he chooses growth instead of emotional collapse. Now he starts focusing on discipline, physical strength, emotional control, financial growth, purpose, and internal stability. Instead of chasing approval from someone who continuously disrespects his boundaries, and slowly he becomes emotionally stronger, because he realizes something powerful: the ability to walk away from disrespect peacefully without anger, begging, or emotional chaos is one of the highest forms of masculine strength, because calm detachment creates freedom, while emotional dependence creates suffering. And once a man understands this, his entire life changes, because he no longer tolerates behavior that destroys his peace simply for temporary affection. He becomes selective with his energy, protective of his standards, and deeply grounded within himself. And that inner stability changes the way women, people, and the entire world respond to him, because a man who respects himself deeply naturally commands respect from others without needing to force it. Number 4. She likes validation. Attention becomes addictive for many women when they realize how easily emotional validation can be extracted from emotionally attached men, because once she understands that your entire emotional state changes based on her responses, her attention, and her approval, she begins controlling the emotional direction of the relationship without even saying it directly. And this is where many men unknowingly become trapped, because they mistake emotional stimulation for genuine connection. They believe her occasional attention means deep interest, while ignoring the reality that she mainly enjoys the reassurance, the compliments, the chasing, the emotional investment, and the constant reminder that she still has access to your mind and emotions whenever she wants. And this creates one of the most emotionally draining situations a man can experience, because he keeps giving more, hoping consistency will create certainty, while she keeps taking emotional energy without fully committing herself in return. And deep down, this slowly destroys his confidence, because he begins measuring his worth through her reactions, her messages, her mood, and her level of attention, while neglecting his own emotional stability completely. And this is why many men live in constant emotional tension around women, because they are addicted to validation themselves without realizing it. They crave reassurance, they crave attention, they crave signs that they are desired, and because of this emotional hunger, they tolerate situations that slowly destroy their self-respect simply to maintain emotional access to a woman who gives them inconsistent attention. And the painful truth is that many women can sense this emotional dependency immediately, because emotional neediness changes the way a man speaks, behaves, texts, reacts, and carries himself. She notices when your mood rises and falls based on her attention, and once she realizes she has that level of emotional control, the relationship dynamic shifts completely, because now she no longer sees you as emotionally grounded. She sees you as emotionally available on demand, and endless availability removes value over time, because people naturally appreciate what requires effort, discipline, and emotional control, while taking for granted what is constantly offered without limits. And this is why many men become confused when a woman loses attraction after receiving endless attention, because they genuinely believe giving more should strengthen connection, while ignoring the reality that attraction often fades when emotional challenge disappears completely. And this is where Stoic principles completely transform a man's life, because instead of chasing validation externally, he begins creating stability internally. He stops seeking constant reassurance from women and starts building confidence through discipline, purpose, routine, emotional restraint, physical improvement, and self-mastery. Because real confidence is not built through attention from women, it is built through the promises a man keeps to himself every single day. And once a man understands this, his entire emotional world changes, because now he no longer panics over delayed messages, cold behavior, emotional inconsistency, or lack of attention. Because he understands his value does not increase or decrease based on someone else's temporary interest. And ironically, this emotional independence makes him far more attractive, because calm, emotionally grounded men stand out immediately in a world filled with emotional desperation, impulsive behavior, and validation seeking. And this is why women often become confused when a man stops chasing attention completely, because they expect emotional reactions, they expect over-pursuing, they expect constant attempts to regain approval. But when a man becomes emotionally disciplined and stops feeding validation endlessly, he shifts the entire energy of the interaction, because now his attention becomes intentional instead of desperate. And intentional attention carries far more weight emotionally than constant emotional availability ever could. And this lesson extends far beyond dating, because many men spend their entire lives emotionally starving for approval from women, friends, family, society, and social media, while abandoning the deeper work required to truly respect themselves internally. And this creates fragile confidence, because any criticism, distance, or emotional withdrawal immediately destabilizes their emotional state. But a man who builds internal strength through discipline and emotional control becomes almost impossible to manipulate, because his peace no longer depends on external approval. And once a man reaches that level of emotional stability, he moves through life differently. He becomes calmer, sharper, more focused, and far less emotionally reactive, because he finally understands that attention without respect means nothing, validation without loyalty means nothing, and emotional excitement without peace eventually becomes emotional exhaustion. And this understanding changes every relationship he enters, because now he no longer chases women for emotional survival. He chooses connections that genuinely align with his standards, while maintaining complete ownership over his emotions, his purpose, and his life. Number 5. She expects you to chase. Chasing becomes dangerous the second a woman realizes you will continue pursuing her, no matter how little effort she gives in return, because once your attention becomes guaranteed, she stops valuing it emotionally. And many men accidentally create this situation themselves by constantly rewarding distance, inconsistency, cold behavior, and emotional confusion with even more attention, more effort, more reassurance, and more emotional investment, hoping persistence will somehow restore attraction, when in reality it often destroys the remaining respect left in the relationship, because chasing communicates something powerful subconsciously. It tells her that you fear losing her more than you value yourself. And women notice this immediately, even when they never admit it openly, because emotional desperation changes the way a man behaves entirely. He becomes overly available, overly forgiving, emotionally reactive, anxious, impatient, and constantly focused on regaining her attention while slowly abandoning his own purpose, routine, and emotional stability. And this creates emotional imbalance because now she becomes the center of his emotional world, while he becomes only a small optional part of hers. And the painful part is that many men believe chasing proves love, when many times it simply proves emotional dependence, because true confidence never begs for attention. Repeatedly, true confidence remains calm, grounded, patient, and fully prepared to walk away from situations that continuously damage peace and self-respect. And this is why so many men suffer deeply in relationships, because they cannot separate love from attachment. They confuse emotional obsession with connection and end up losing themselves, trying to hold on to women who clearly enjoy the power dynamic more than the relationship itself. And once a woman realizes she can ignore you, disrespect you, pull away emotionally, and still receive endless effort from you, she unconsciously stops fearing your absence, because your attention no longer feels earned, it feels guaranteed. And guaranteed attention loses emotional impact over time, no matter how genuine your intentions are. And this is why emotional discipline becomes one of the most important qualities a man can develop. Because instead of reacting impulsively every time she creates distance, you begin remaining centered within yourself. You stop allowing another person's behavior to dictate your emotional state, and you begin understanding that your time, energy, and attention are valuable resources that should never be handed out endlessly to people who continuously fail to appreciate them. And this changes everything, because now you stop chasing emotionally unavailable women and start focusing entirely on becoming stronger mentally, physically, financially, and spiritually. And ironically, this shift often creates the exact reaction many men desperately wanted in the beginning, because once a man genuinely stops chasing and redirects his energy back into his own growth, women often begin noticing the emotional space he once filled constantly. They notice his absence, his silence, his emotional restraint, and suddenly the dynamic changes, because people naturally become curious about what no longer seeks their approval obsessively. And this is why Stoic principles create so much power in a man's life, because emotional self-control allows him to observe situations calmly instead of reacting emotionally to every emotional trigger placed in front of him. And many men completely transform once they finally stop chasing, because for the first time in years, they begin focusing on themselves instead of exhausting their minds, trying to gain validation from women who never truly intended to value them properly in the first place. And this creates a powerful awakening, because they realize how much energy, time, focus, and emotional peace they sacrificed, trying to force connection where mutual effort no longer existed. And instead of becoming bitter, they become disciplined, sharper, calmer, and more emotionally intelligent, because pain forces reflection, and reflection creates wisdom when handled correctly. And eventually, a man reaches a point where he no longer fears losing people who fail to appreciate him, because he finally understands something deeply important. His life becomes far more powerful the second he stops chasing external validation and starts building internal strength instead. And from that point forward, he no longer moves through life emotionally starving for attention. He moves with quiet confidence, emotional control, patience, discipline, and purpose. And those qualities naturally separate him from the emotionally reactive men who continuously lose themselves, chasing people who never deserved that level of emotional access to begin with. People spend their entire lives emotionally trapped, chasing validation, tolerating disrespect, and losing themselves in relationships. Because nobody teaches men the timeless principles that build emotional strength, discipline, self-respect, and true inner control, which is exactly why the Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men is changing lives right now with powerful wisdom built on Stoic principles that have transformed strong men for more than 2,000 years and stood the test of time. And now the audiobook version is finally available in the comments, so you can rebuild your mind while walking, training, driving, or sitting alone, thinking deeply about the man you need to become. The Stoic Relationship Blueprint course for men is also launching in the coming weeks for those truly ready to completely transform their lives and relationships from the inside out, using these timeless principles in a deeper way. Because the truth is, the world benefits when men stay emotionally weak, distracted, reactive, and dependent instead of calm, disciplined, emotionally grounded, and impossible to manipulate. Comment, unshaken, if you are ready to take back control of your life. Grab the ebook linked in the comments before another year of your life disappears in emotional confusion. And like and subscribe to help more men discover these truths before they waste years begging for love, instead of building themselves into the kind of man who never needs to beg again.